Oh, did I do something?
Yeah.
Oh, mercy.
I gotta redo it. It
Okay.
didn't hit that.
Yeah, I hit that. I forget. Don't want it to hit it.
All right. So I gotta set everything up.
Okay.
To yeah, knock that out.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm up there.
Let's see.
Hmm. Gee, how did I do that? Guess this thing touched it. I'm gonna do that from here. I'll be more careful.
Stop the music.
Yep.
Good afternoon. All right. Are we on? Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon out there. Good afternoon and blessings. I tell you, this is a very special month, as a matter of fact, but a special day anyway. I am thanking God always for the opportunity to share knowledge. I think you all can see that we need a whole lot of true knowledge these days because a whole lot of things are going on. I won't even get into it right now. But I do thank God for this opportunity, and I want to thank my crew for helping me bring you all this information. My producers, Sheila Brown Bird, Lula Salvador Williams, and my advisor, Juanita McClure. Of course, my promo crew, Awa and Elijah, and also my engineer, Norm. This young man keeps me real and keeps us moving. And of course, my co-host Terry, I call him King Terry Benjamin. We really so grateful that we could come and share information with you. I tell you all that. Of course, you all know me. I'm Ruby Williams Shivers, your unapologetic amateur, still looking for experts in Africanism. And we're bringing them on because that's so needed. Now, I told you that this month is set aside for, and we're dedicated to our idea of reparation. Now, for us, the African people, reparation is not an anomaly. Many groups have gotten it. We're not talking hieroglyphics, right? It's plain old English, but or maybe Latin. I don't know. Of course, you know the English language is a conglomerate of stolen language from everywhere, but even so, when I think of reparation, I told you that I believe it's the elephant in the room. But I think of the ancestor John Conyers, uh, uh, Congressman, the late ancestor John Conyers. He was the first time I heard about reparation was when Congressman Conyers introduced the bill H.R. 40, pretty much I think around 1989 or so, and that whole concept of reparation it just sort of was obviously it was interesting to me as an African, knowing how much the history of my ancestors who worked this place, and that we could at least sort of believe we could realize some compensation, same as other folks who had gotten it before. So when Brother Kanye, uh, representative, congressman, brought the idea forward, and not that it hadn't been brought forward before, but he was doing it, and so it gave us hope that there might be an opportunity for us to at least be compensated for some of the stuff we have given to this country. And it wasn't just our labor. I tell people that too. It was not just our labor, because if we were to uh, uh, itemize some of the things that we should be compensated for, we would have to go to the rape of our people, the lynching of our people, those kinds of things that would be included in bringing up a package for reparation for us, which will be different from anyone else. And that's why it's so hard for me sometimes to fathom how we have not been compensated when other folks have been. Not that they shouldn't have been, because they rightly deserve it also. It's just that it seems that when it comes to us, somehow we are just missing in the calculation. So my co-host Terry Benjamin, welcome Terry. We are going to be talking. I don't know. I guess my guest is not come on yet.
Okay.
Looking for Larry Ham, and he's going to bring us some information about reparation. Because as I said, this month is dedicated to that subject matter, and he is so knowledgeable. He knows a whole lot about the reparation project here in New Jersey. So we're going to wait for him. But in the meantime, Terry,
we have
welcome.
a lot to talk about. You're welcome. And the thing is, I think somebody like Larry Ham is really appropriate for this because he is well known in New Jersey as not only a civil rights activist, but also as a human rights activist, humanitarian, public speaker, and recently an author. But I think, again, I believe, as we spoke last week to Brother Bill Davis, I think this has to be a grassroots movement. I think we have to really get down to the people and really give them the education that they need, the information that they need to understand this reparations situation is not a handout to us. It's really something that we are more than entitled to.
Exactly.
I think a lot of times, we as black people, we have very short memories, and we also like to do the right thing. But the right thing is really to take care of ourselves.
Exactly.
And not realizing that, okay, we've been hurt, but there is a reason to look for and ask for redress.
Right. One of the reasons I was so anxious to get Brother Larry Ham on is because there is a program afoot in New Jersey for reparation. And I don't have the name readily available to me, but I do know that I think there was a group that started something on reparation in the state of New Jersey last year sometime. I think we have our guest on, and I am just so pleased to have him on, because I know I could not tell you half as much as he's going to be able to share with us.
He's the expert.
He's the master. Yes, he is. And I'm so pleased to have him. It's interesting about this young man. This young man, I had him on before. And I knew this young man when he was a young man, too. He's still a young man. But, I know I was working in Newark there. I lived in Elizabeth. I always met him to work in Newark. I think I was working for Councilman Donald Tucker at the time when he came, the youngest person to have become part of the Board of Education.
That's right. Yes,
I was either working for Donald Tucker, or I used to work in an office with John Houston.
Okay, yeah.
Cicely Houston father. At the time, she was not a star.
Yes.
But John used to tell me all the time about how great she was.
Yes.
John Houston would say she was about 16 at the time, and he would say, Ruby, her voice is better than my wife. I couldn't even imagine that, because his wife was Cicely Houston.
Oh, yeah.
And
well,
there was no one. I could not even imagine
How could you
anyone
top
being
that?
better than Cicely.
Of course, yeah.
But years later, when I heard her, I said, well, not better. I still not saying better, but boy, was she everything he said she was, and then more. But Larry, we're just so glad to have you on, because when I think of reparations, see, I was telling people I think of our ancestor, Congressman John Conyers, because I know when he brought it to our attention, and it was the first time I had heard about it, and I was so impressed and so pleased, and it continued to go.
Yes.
But what we're bringing you on today, because we have said this month's going to be set aside for us to talk about reparation and to educate us. We're going to have you educate us, inform us, enlighten us, encourage us. We're going to see if we can get this reparation going. So welcome, Brother Larry.
Welcome. And let us...
Oh, I'm so glad to be on, Sister Ruby. And my brother, I'm so glad to be on with you.
Good to see you.
Good
Good
to
to
see
see
you.
you.
Good to see you. So
Yeah,
where can we begin?
we can begin by asking you. When I think of reparation, it excites me, but I'm discouraged because of the response we've been getting from our people. But
Mhm.
I think about it in terms of what would we look like if we had a reparation today, Larry,
That's a good question.
Brother Larry.
That's a good question.
Well, that is a good question. And if we had received reparations at the time when objective and subjective conditions were most right, our situation would be very different than it is today. I'm not going to say it would be heaven. I'm not going to say it would be perfect, but our socioeconomic status would certainly be different because the contemporary idea of slavery reparations to the descendants of those Africans that were enslaved here in the United States, the contemporary idea goes back to the very commonly held notion of 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah, we heard that.
Now, we talk about that and people talk about it lightly. Sometimes people joke about it. I've seen references in movies and
Yeah,
television programs, people talk about it. But it was a very serious proposal
very, yes.
that occurred during the Civil War. Now, that particular episode, because the idea of reparation goes all the way back to the 18th century.
Oh,
There were Africans in the United States who had been enslaved, some of whom had escaped slavery and demanded compensation from their former masters. Some of whom had achieved their freedom, had gotten their freedom, and were demanding compensation. But this idea of a mass compensation to Black people really has its roots in the Civil War, and it was January 16th, 1865, that General William Tecumseh Sherman issued General Order Number 15. And General Order Number 15, you can look it up and read it. It's not like a ancient document that's
Well,
disappeared.
right.
You can read the text
Well,
of it.
Larry,
It's in it.
nothing is ancient in our lives. That's what's so interesting about us as African people. So like right there, a lot of us know a lot about a lot of things
That's right,
that have
that's right.
happened to us, and it's still haven't been rectified or
That's
compensated
right.
for.
That's right. But let me just finish here. So many people know about the Civil War and the untold story, and this would require a whole separate program, separate and apart from the issue of reparations, and that's the role that Black men played in the Civil War. The North would not have won the South had it not been for the participation of mostly formerly enslaved African men who escaped their masters and joined the Union Army.
Exactly.
The first supreme commander of the Union forces was not Grant. It was someone else whose name escapes me right now, but that person wouldn't fight. He had 100,000 men camped out down there on the Potomac River within eyeshot of the White House.
Right.
Lincoln could literally look out the window and see the military encampments, and he sent telegrams to the saying, when you're going to fight. So finally, Lincoln fired him and hired Ulysses S. Grant. And Ulysses S. Grant mobilized the Northern forces. And Grant hired a fellow named William Tecumseh Sherman. And, initially, they would not let Black men join the Union Army. They did not want Black forces, but the South was beating the North. It's as simple as that. And Lincoln, not out of any deep compassion for black people, he had to find a way to win this war, or he wasn't going to win re-election, and the United States may not have stayed united.
Right.
So what happened was that Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner and other radical Republicans went to Lincoln and said, you need to put arms, rifles of those who have the most interest in winning this war. And at first, Lincoln was very resistant because they didn't want black men. You know, a lot of white soldiers didn't want to serve next to black people. But Lincoln had no choice. So he issues the Emancipation Proclamation, which was actually written in the summer of 1862. It was issued that summer. Not issued, but written. But Lincoln couldn't announce it until the conditions had changed. And he announced it after the Battle of Antietam. He announced it in September of 1862. It became effective January 1st, 1863. And it was a military recruitment document. It didn't free all slaves. It only freed those who were enslaved in Confederate areas. It says it. If you read the Emancipation Proclamation, it offers freedom to those who are in the states, counties, and parishes that are in rebellion. So they had to escape and join the Union Army. And 220,000 black men joined the Union forces, and they turned the tide. And so Sherman, you know, makes his famous march to the South, and he gets to South Carolina, and he calls in black ministers and says, what do you demand? What is it that your people need? And the black ministers said, we need land. It's as simple as that. We need land. We want our own land. And so Sherman issues a military order. This was not a law of Congress. This was not a proclamation of the president at first. This was a military pronouncement. A general order, number 15. He expropriated. That is, he seized 400,000 acres of slave masters' land to distribute to the formerly enslaved people that worked those lands. 400,000 acres along the coast from South Carolina to Florida. This general order number 15 became shortly thereafter the basis of a congressional bill, H.R. 29, that said every person that served in the Army or their surviving dependents would receive 40 acres and $50. And that the land distribution actually began. Some of the people actually got the 40 acres. But what happened was Lincoln was assassinated, and his vice president, Andrew Johnson, was a slave master from Tennessee. Imagine that. It's so complex. He's a slave master, you know, from Tennessee. And what does he immediately set about to do? To return all the confiscated land back to the slave masters. He issued through executive orders. And H.R. 29, which was in the Congress, never got passed. But this idea of compensation, you know, lived on for some generations. There was a woman, her name was Callie House. And I'm sure you heard about Callie House. Callie House lived at the end of the 19th century. She actually tried to start a movement to get Congress to offer pensions to formerly enslaved people, to people who had been enslaved. But that movement failed. Marcus Garvey was another one who demanded a type of reparations, that is assistance so that we could be repatriated back to Africa. But I tell you, when I came upon the issue of reparations, I was a delegate to the National Black Political Convention in Gary, Indiana in 1972. I was the youngest delegate. You had mentioned earlier I had been appointed to the school board
Right.
the previous year when I was 17.
Yes. Yes.
And I met Amiri Baraka in the summer of 1971. And he had just begun the movement toward Gary. And I
Okay.
was one of the elected delegates out of the
Out of
Gary delegation. So we there at the high school where the convention was in Gary. I think it was Central High School in Gary. But we're at the high school, and I'm going through the hallways, go to workshop. And who do I see, Sister Ruby? I see Queen Mother Moore.
Queen Mother Moore.
She's standing in the hallway
Wow.
giving out leaflets.
Brother Ham, let me just,
Talk
you know,
about reparations.
since you talked about how you got to the Gary and how young you were,
Mhm.
I want to read a little
Yes.
portion of your book just so we can solidify what you just
Okay.
said.
Perspective.
Yeah, look at that. Larry just wrote this book, and I was reading it recently, and I see the prologue, and I'm just going to say this. If you're going to read it, said tears filled my mother's eyes as she looked at me. Larry, what are you doing with your life? Grace Ham, an everyday working woman, had had enough. She had become used to seeing me pictured and quoted in the newspapers, but this time it was a little different. The headline in the New York Times said it all. Alhimu, I hope I'm correctly pronouncing your name.
Adimo.
Adimo Shaingo, 19 and angry. My mother was upset at me at various times in my life. She was deeply disappointed when I was suspended from elementary school. Years later, she would be annoyed when her soap operas were interrupted by TV commentator editorializing against the red, black, and green flag in public schools. In that moment, it was clear to me that the Newark mayor, Kenneth Gibson, was very disappointed with me, and I was stunned to read that comment in the newspaper. I wasn't stunned that he said it, but surprised he said it publicly. Mayor Gibson was a hero in the black community, locally and nationally, after becoming the first black mayor of a northeastern city. In another article, he said that naming me, Larry Ham, to the Newark Board of Education in 1971 was the worst mistake he had ever made. His appointment made me at 17 the youngest board member in American history. So you see, this man has been on the case, and you see where his knowledge is thorough
Life
and deep.
in the struggle.
And so you're
Life
going
in
to
the
tell me
struggle.
why was he disappointed in you? Because you've always been an activist out there that people sometimes can't understand, particularly at that young age, how you would have been so deeply involved.
Yes.
So
Yes.
go on and tell
Well,
us.
he was disappointed because I guess I was such a thorn in his side. You know, he wanted to have a smooth administration
Right.
without controversy, without confrontation. And every day of my life that I was on the school board, it was controversy. You know, you had mentioned 1972 was the year that the board had passed the resolution that enables students to bring the red, black, and green flag to school. You know, students were trying to reclaim their history and their culture, and they would
Right.
bring the red, black, and green flag to school, and the teachers would tell them, you can't bring that flag to this school. You can't show that flag in this school.
Right, right.
And I had proposed a resolution to permit students to bring the red, black, and green flag as a teaching instrument, as a teaching tool.
Yes, yes.
And the board passed it. I didn't do it on my own, you know. All 5 of the board members, or how many majority, they voted for it. And then the next day in the New York Times, Amiri Baraka said he was in Tanzania. He said he read about it in Tanzania.
Oh, my goodness.
You know, you would think that there was some kind, that a revolution
Right. Yeah.
had
Well, it
taken
was
place.
revolutionary,
It was
I guess, at that time. You
It
know.
was revolutionary back then. Yes, it was. And I'm gonna tell you something. It's fortunate. They are fortunate. Those who were in power at that time were fortunate that I didn't know then what I know now.
Oh, yeah.
Because I would have given them even more hell if I could have. Imagine this, that the children of those who were enslaved
Yeah.
in the United States would have to get up every day and in special auditorium programs and sing a national anthem that was written by a slave master. Francis Scott Key was a slave master. He owned 7 slaves. Our children are forced to sing a song not just written by a slave master, but the 3rd stanza of which attacks and denigrates Black people. But we never sing the 3rd stanza, so people don't know this. You know, I mean, and there's so many more. I was in a play when I was in elementary school, right? I was in a play. Guess who I was playing, Ruby?
What's that?
I was playing George Washington. I had to stand up on that stage and
what
say,
have we gone through?
I cannot tell a lie. I cannot tell a lie. I chopped down the cherry tree. Nobody told me in 8 years of elementary school and in 4 years of high school, even when I got to college, that George Washington was a slave master. In fact, not only was he a slave master, he was one of the biggest slave masters. He owned over 100 slaves. His wife, before he married her, she owned over 100 slaves. And when they got married, they had 317 slaves. I wish I had known that. When this red, black, and green controversy.
And you wonder why they don't want us to know our history now? DeSantis taking our history out of the little bit we have. You wonder why they don't want us to know all that?
I don't wonder why.
But that's why we have you here. And I would think, I was going to ask you the question, why do you think that people have a problem with us talking about reparation? Because, you know, it's not just like anyone else who's gotten it. When we bring up the word reparation, they want to change the definition and call it something else.
They don't want Black people to have nothing.
That's it. Simple as that.
That's why they won't talk about reparation. They don't want us to have reparations. They don't even want us to have equal rights. Right now, there's a whole movement in this country whose leader is Donald Trump, but it's a movement of more than 76 million people, the Trump supporters, to take back our civil rights. What did Clarence Thomas say after they overthrew the Roe decision on abortion? He said, now we can revisit Brown. What Brown was he talking about? Brown versus Topeka, Kansas Board of Education, which is the foundational legislation for civil rights. Everything, every law dealing with any kind of discrimination in America, be it education, housing, healthcare, employment, all are based on Brown. That separate but equal is unconstitutional. And I'm telling you, this is what they are driving toward.
Oh, sure. The Project 2025. You're going to tell us about the Project 2025. I guess that is very clear. But let me ask you before we get confused and before our people start thinking we all don't have a reason. Can you explain the Clarence Thomases of the world for us? I try to do it sometime, but just goes into deaf ears. They don't really believe that we have Clarence Thomases in our midst. But there's a reason behind it. There's a book, and I know you know it, Larry, called the Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Right. Now, it sounds to me that when we have someone in our midst like Clarence Thomas, that's a very, he's a very example of what post-traumatic slave syndrome have done to us. Because there's no human being, white, black, blue, or green, would want to go back to what we went through. And if Clarence Thomas can't see that, that means that we need to really check him out.
He don't want to see it.
He don't want to.
Well, I want to talk to my Christian brothers and sisters just for a second.
Go on.
that this Clarence Thomas idea is not a new idea. You remember in the Bible, now I'm not making a reference here in a historical sense. And I'm making it in the religious text, in the biblical context,
Mhm.
that when Moses took the children of Israel out of Egypt, he took them into the wilderness. And there was a character who we meet, I believe it's in Kings in the Old Testament. His name was Dathan. And when Moses, whenever people of Israel were confronted with some difficulty, Dathan would say, we got to go back to Pharaoh.
Right. Yeah.
Moses is going to cause you to starve to death.
Oh,
You're going to perish in the wilderness. Why do you follow Moses? Come on with me back to Pharaoh. At least you'll have food. And if you saw that movie, the Ten Commandments, what was the character that played? Charlton Heston playing Moses.
Mhm.
Edgar G. Robinson played the character called Dathan that was always trying to go back to slavery because he had a privileged position. When his people were enslaved, he was the interlocutor between the Egyptians and the Israelites. The Egyptians would say, do such and such. They would tell Dathan, and Dathan would run down and say, Pharaoh say you got to do this. And then if you saw Django, you know the character that Samuel Jackson played, Stephen, who was the butler. You know, these people are iconic figures. They're always collaborators. I don't care what situation you look at, where there's one group of oppressed people and another group of oppressors, there's always someone that will collaborate with the oppressor in order to have a privileged position.
In any group. That goes for any group. That, so that's not something that's just specific for ours. But since ours have been so damaged, it's just so obvious that you should be think differently. But how can you think differently if you have been trained over to what I tell people about the definitions that that we allow other folks to put upon us. I hear recently, I think it was brother that we had last week.
Bill Davis?
He was saying that they're trying to get away from the word reparation.
Yeah,
Yes.
So then you wonder why a person would do that when they've given everyone else the reparation under that term. So why would they change it for us? But that's the idea behind why you trying to dilute our situation when you do that kind of stuff. When you say, well, it's not reparation, and that allows other people to come in over time, just like affirmative action. They give us these things, and then other folks will come in and say, well, I deserve affirmative action also, which white women have benefited more from affirmative action than us. So what do you think about this whole idea of them trying to redefine what we call reparation, something different?
Right. Well, they don't want to call it reparations because, see, you have to understand that racism permeates all aspects of this society and permeates all demographics in this society. Racists are not just Republicans. Some people think that only racists are Republicans. No. There are racist Democrats.
That's right.
There are large numbers of racist Democrats. That's why they be talking about these purple states.
Exactly.
These Democrats that want to vote for Trump because they identify more with him.
And that's why they talk about both sides.
That's right. Even here in New Jersey, look, we got a Democratic governor. We have a majority of Democrats in the state Senate. We have a majority of Democrats in the Assembly. Black people are the most loyal constituency to the Democratic Party. And we can't even get a reparations study bill passed. We ain't talking about real reparations. We ain't talking about this is a bill for $14 trillion that's going to give $300,000 to each black family. That's not the bill, not yet. That would have been the bill if I had been elected to the Senate. That's the bill that Larry Ham would have introduced that bill.
Of course.
What we're talking about now is a bill that would create a commission to study the issue of reparations and recommendations to state legislature. Don't even want to do that.
Yeah.
And it goes to show you the poverty. I'm not just talking about economic poverty here, but the political poverty
Right.
that exists in terms of what the Democratic Party will and will not do.
Yeah.
So we all should be demanding the passage, because I don't want people to misunderstand me. I support the reparations bills. I
Right.
support in New Jersey A 601 and S 3164.
Mhm.
Those are the reparations bills in New Jersey, and I support HR 40
Right.
and S 40 in the Congress. They would both do essentially the same thing, create bodies that would study the issue of reparations and make recommendations to the legislature and recommendations to the Congress on what form reparations should take to African Americans. But I also call for, and others, I'm not the only one calling for this, it may be a while before we can get folks in the assembly and in the legislature to pass these bills. I have publicly called for President Biden to just go ahead and appoint a presidential commission.
Right. That's as simple as
Just
that.
appoint the
Some
commission.
things you can do.
Yeah, you can
Well,
do
why
that.
wait for Congress? He has the power
Yeah.
as president to appoint a commission to study the issue of reparations and make recommendations as to what form and shape reparations take to the descendants of Africans that were enslaved here in the United States.
Right.
But this is going to be a tough fight. I'm not
Oh.
going to lie to people.
Mhm.
If we can't keep affirmative action, how do you
Exactly.
think they're going to react on reparations?
Everything we've ever
If
done.
we can't get
Yeah, yeah.
we-
Exactly.
keep affirmative action, and that ain't even helping black people that much. It's
Exactly.
helping a little bit,
That's
but we
right.
can't keep that. There's going to be a fight over reparations, but it's a fight that we should have.
And that's right. We can't.
should have
we
that
we
fight.
gotta have. We can't. You can't. We have no choice in the matter. We got to continue to fight. But Larry, give me an idea. Tell me, how then did other people manage to get reparation without a big fight? I mean, was it a fight? Give me some insight about that. The Japanese, the Jewish people, the
Well,
whomever.
right. Well, the Japanese received reparations.
Hmm.
They got it through Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying, what's the
It was Ronald Reagan who signed the bill. He didn't put up resistance to it because the Japanese were interned. That is, they were locked up in concentration camps
right?
during World War II. That is Japanese American. We're not talking about Japanese from Japan or prisoners of war. We're talking about people who were here just as long as these white immigrants
Right.
owned land and businesses in California and other places and had their property taken from them.
Right.
And they were put in internment in concentration camps
Yeah.
during World War II. So they got, I think, $20,000 per family.
Mm.
And they received that. And the United States has made millions of dollars now I'm talking about the United States government now,
Right.
has made millions of dollars of contributions to funds that have been set up to help the survivors, those that were in slave labor camps under the Nazis in
Right.
Europe, in
So
Germany,
my
and in
question
other
is,
countries. In
was
Europe.
there a fight getting that, and what?
No, there
happened?
wasn't no fight. There wasn't. If there was a fight, you would have heard about it. There wasn't no fight.
Yeah, I'm saying maybe I was.
There's
just
never no
out of
fight.
the-
The only time there's a fight is when it comes to the welfare and well-being of black
Why
people.
you think that
That's
is?
the only time there is a fight.
Right.
We
why-
had to fight against slavery.
Right.
We had to fight against lynching. We couldn't even get an anti-lynching law.
Yeah,
Isn't
that's
that
true. Yeah.
When the lynching was going on the most, we couldn't get an anti-lynching law through Congress.
Hey.
We had to fight against Jim Crow. We had to fight against rape. And we still fight.
Still
you know,
fighting. It
because
got to be
this
a reason,
country-
or you think they may be afraid of us in
Yes,
some
the
capacity?
reason is that this country, that racism and hatred for black people
Yeah, yeah.
was baked into the social fabric
And
of the
maybe more
United
afraid,
States.
you think? I think they're more afraid because they know our capability. They know what we are. They know the people we are. One of the reasons when they came into Africa and stole us from that land, they had sent people over there prior to that to demean us, to dehumanize, to make the world think we were something other than what they knew we were.
Mhm.
So I'm suspecting that that's what they're so afraid of, that if we
Well,
ever...
they knew we were because we ruled them for so many
Yeah,
years. You know, the Moors went over into Africa. I mean, went out of Africa, went to Europe around 700 AD and ruled Europe. The Moors went all the way up into Germany through Portugal, Spain, France, and into Germany and ruled for 700 years. The last battle to overturn Moorish rule. The Moors were Africans who had come out of North Africa, went over the Straits of Hercules, and went that where the tip of Spain meets the tip of Morocco, went over and conquered. They knew who we were. You know, not only did they know, some of us were in their families. The royal families had a lot of black rulers that were part of their families. So they knew who we were.
yeah, they
And
knew.
in order to enslave us, they had to deny our humanity. They had to change the record, the historical
Exactly.
record,
Exactly.
and make us into chattel.
Right. It's so interesting that because you would have to, the question would have to come from anyone to say, well, if these groups that we know have gotten reparation without any bother, without, what makes it so difficult for ours? Ours is very obvious. You know, unlike
Right.
the other groups, and I have no, you know, they deserve it. But the ours was uniquely different in that ours should be the first one to have gotten reparation. We should have been the first one because we, not only, you just mentioned, not only our free labor, but we fought in wars
That's right.
for this country.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. We
So-
fought in every war.
Yeah.
But see, this is why that window, because very rarely are our students, they teach about the Civil War, but they don't teach about Reconstruction, the period right after the Civil War, when there was an attempt, at least there was movement in the direction of trying to correct what the evils of slavery had done. And, you know, they passed the 13th Amendment. By the way, Juneteenth was not the day that all black people were freed.
Right.
I don't know why they keep telling that. It's just like Christmas. Everybody knows Jesus was not born in the wintertime in December. You know, the Catholic Church picked that day to observe the birthday of Christ. But most historians know that Jesus wasn't born in the winter. He was born in the spring, according to the biblical text.
Right.
But slavery does not end until the passage of the 13th Amendment in December of 1865.
Right.
They even say that the black people in Texas were the last to be free. They were not the last to be freed. The last to be freed were the enslaved people in the border states, Kentucky and other places that were in the South, but were part of the Union.
Okay.
They were part of the Union, but because they sided with the North, they were able to keep their enslaved people enslaved
Okay.
until the passage of the 13th Amendment. See, we gotta make sure. I'm all for the holiday. I don't want anybody misinterpret me. Anytime we can have, black people can have a day off from the plantation, I'm for it. But we got to
Gotta
tell
know
people
what
the
it's about.
truth. We
Yeah.
got to know what was going on. It
yeah.
was the day the people in Texas found out. And the truth is, they already knew.
Yeah.
It wasn't about finding out about somebody telling them. They already knew what had to happen.
Yeah.
Federal troops had to come in and make them slave masters stand
Obey
back.
the rule. Yeah. Yeah.
Our people were enslaved under the barrel of a gun.
Yes.
We were kept in slavery by force, by armed force,
Right.
by the force of slave patrol, overseers, and every armies. the whole Second Amendment in the Constitution, the right to bear arms, was so colonies could have the right to form their own militias to put down slave rebellions.
Yeah, it's nothing
All
like
of
knowing
that
your history.
relates
Nothing
to
like
us.
knowing your history. It's nothing like knowing your history, and that's why they're so serious about keeping the history from it. Because as you
But
said,
let
Larry,
me
there
just
was
finish.
rebellions.
Let me just finish this point real quick on reparations
No,
and
keep going.
Reconstruction. The 13th Amendment was passed to end chattel slavery, the 14th Amendment for citizenship, and the 15th Amendment so black men could get the right to vote. But the other thing they created was the Freedmen's Bureau, which also helped to bring about education. And then you had the Reconstruction governments, those state legislatures of the former Confederate states that in many places were now dominated by black people. We were going in the right direction, but what happens? In 1877, you get the Tilden Hayes Compromise. What was that a compromise about? Just like today, one person won the popular vote, the other one won the Electoral College. They had to make a deal on who would get the White House. So the Democrats, who was the party of the Confederacy at that time, said, okay, y'all can have the White House, but you gotta withdraw the federal troops out of the South. Whatever rights we had were being ensured by those federal troops that had been stationed in the South since the end of the Civil War in 1865. And when they withdrew those federal troops, they also closed down the Freedmen's Bureau, and that was the end of Reconstruction. That was it, right there. That was the historic moment when, if conditions had been different, because I read an essay recently by Henry Louis Gates, and he said, now this is Gates talking, and everybody probably looks at Gates and says he's a moderate, but Gates said the 40 acres and a mule, the General Order number 15, and the HR 29 was probably, and he was actually quoting Philip Foner when he wrote this, one of the most revolutionary proposals that probably happened in the United States since the country was founded up until that time. Imagine what life would have been like if the 4 million formerly enslaved people had all got their 40 acres. We would have been a whole different people from that. Now, that's not to say that everybody would have been successful and everybody would have kept their land, but I'm telling you this, our situation would be a lot different because we would have had an economic basis in society.
As any group, there's no perfect any group. So ours would not have been perfect in terms of maintaining or keeping up what we had, but it would have been to the point that we would have been on equal footing. And when you're on equal footing with folks, they respect you differently.
They do.
Respect you.
That's right.
And we respect ourselves differently.
That's right.
So exactly. But the bottom line, well, we
That's
don't
right.
respect ourselves because we don't look beyond our circumstances. I always say that about us as African people, and it's not our fault. Again, I'll use that. It's never our fault about how we came to be what we are. But we really don't look beyond our circumstances. If we did, we'll realize that if we are not doing what other folks are doing, it's not our fault. It must be a reason. Once you get back to the reason, which is 400 years plus of slavery and Jim Crowism and all that other stuff, that create people who may be in a position not to think as well as some of our people that I call experts in Africanism. That's why I use that term. I'm an unapologetic amateur looking for experts in Africanism. Because when you know what you know, what you know, my mama said you know what you know, what you know.
You know what you know.
But when you don't, you become a Clarence Thomas. And I think he went to Harvard University, so it has nothing to do with your academic. It has nothing to do with your school, and it has to do with what you know about your people and yourself. Now, I'm looking for my people. I know they should be appearing.
You know
so
what Frederick Douglass said? You know, you know what Frederick Douglass said about emancipation? Frederick Douglass said it was freedom to starve.
Okay.
That's what Frederick Douglass said.
Yeah.
Freedom to starve.
Yeah.
Because they did not come through with the economic part.
Right.
And they knew that there needed to be an
Knew
economic
that.
Yeah,
part,
of course, of course.
you know?
Uh-huh. They knew how they have taken care of themselves. Look at situation over the
That's
history
right.
of this
That's it,
country
yes,
and see how they provided for each other
For
when they know
themselves,
they were
yeah.
in need. After World War One, they built all these communities
That's
and
right, yeah,
we gave
yeah.
free schooling and
housing
free
for the
housing,
veterans and everything, yeah,
so
yeah.
they understand clearly
Of course
what
they
it
do. Of
takes
course
to
they
be a human being.
Yes, yes.
But they wanted to humanize us, so they were going to throw just out to the wolves and then point fingers at us and say this, that, and the other that we weren't.
Yeah, well,
you
that's
know.
how they justified it. Too.
Yeah. So, Larry, when you talk about reparation, and it seems to be paramount now on the agenda, unlike maybe some time before. Am I correct? I mean, we're talking about it more seriously now, right? So, what do you think will be the results of our concern about it at this time?
Well, I think what the results will be commensurate with how much support Black people give to the issue of reparations.
Okay.
Because at this moment, as you alluded to, Sister Ruby, in your opening remarks, there's still some work that has to be done among our own people. I hear Black people right now, we talk about reparations. First thing they say is a white man don't owe me nothing. That's the first thing a lot of folks.
Now think about that person that would
You
say
know,
something
he
like
don't
that.
owe me nothing. He owe you everything. He owe you everything. This country would not be the rich and powerful country that it is today had it not been for our ancestors and the stolen labor, the 400 years of stolen labor. And you know, a lot of times people only count from 1619. But I'm gonna tell you something. The first Africans got to the first enslaved Africans came to the Western Hemisphere in the 1400s and were brought to Brazil. The next group came in the 1500s. Some of our kids went to St. Augustine College. St. Augustine was established as a colony by the Spanish.
Yeah.
And that was in the 1500s, not in 1619. That was 100 years earlier in 1565.
Right.
So if you count and say okay, we won't count from Brazil. We'll count from Florida.
Right.
You count from then to emancipation, that's 400 years.
Yeah.
Not 245 years. But whether it's 245 or 400, they had hundreds of years of stolen labor that they used to build this country. You know, in 1860, the biggest industry in America, bigger than banking and bigger than industry, was the institution of slavery.
Yeah.
Slavery was the biggest capital investment of the United States.
Yeah.
You know, it was the engine by which wealth was produced and accumulated that led to the Industrial Revolution and other progress in the country. You know, I look at New Jersey. I'm here in New Jersey, and you are too, right? You in New Jersey? You in New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
We in New Jersey. This was a Dutch colony founded in 1620. By 1625, enslaved Africans were here in New Jersey. 1625. People tell us to go back to Africa. We got to go. Everybody got to go except the Native Americans.
Exactly.
This was their land.
Yeah.
This country was built on the genocide against the indigenous people and the enslavement and exploitation of the African people.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yes.
But you know, Brother Larry, just think about how many people don't really know that. And we look at folks like Clarence Thomas and the other guy that you said that said the state we're not owed anything by the government. I one of the reasons I keep stressing the point, this expression I use is not to be cute or anything like that. It's for real. When I say I'm an unapologetic amateur looking for experts in Africanism, I mean that there got to be some of us who can get together under an umbrella. I use the analogy. I always use the analogy of the virus. That virus that came through, When it came through and
Yes,
hit us all
Corona.
and killed
Corona.
killed over 2 million people across the world, we didn't go around looking for celebrities. We didn't even go around looking for the president of the United States who happened to be Trump, telling us to inject ourselves with bleach. We knew right away that we needed something specific, someone who has studied that specifically. So I'm using that as an example for my people to look at us as African people. I know a whole lot. I tell people I'm an expert in black living because I live black every day. Go out in here, I know what all that.
Right.
But I'm not an expert in living black living. I'm an expert in living black because I live black every day. But I'm not an expert in black living because black living encompasses so much. It means that we got to know our beginning, the very nature of how we came into this world, and God put us here first. Then we got to know this enslavement situation, how we created societies before they stole us, and the society that they're copying today. And even when we were brought over here, stolen and brought over here, we got to know that whole thing about the Middle Passage. We got to know how we were hoisted up on slave ships and sold and all that stuff. Got to know how we were stripped, and this is what makes us different from any other people enslaved. So we got to stop using that word, because if everybody else was enslaved, and they would tell you in a minute, oh, we enslaved ourselves. Africans enslaved each other. Well, it wasn't the same. So let's distinguish between what we happened to us over 200 years, which was stripping of our humanity, our language, our culture, our religion, all that. No one else has ever been done that way. We've had slavery, but not in that capacity. So let's call it something else. Maybe genocide, maybe Ma'afa, whatever, but it wasn't slavery. And then after that, having been abused unlike any other human being that you read about, biblical or otherwise, so there's nothing to compare to us. We are uniquely different, so we should be compensated uniquely different. When the other folks got what they call reparation because of what had happened to them, and deservedly so. We should get something different because we build this nation that we call America here in the this part of the hemisphere. And not only did we do that, we were raped, we were beaten, we were lynched, we were thrown into fire furnace, and all that other kind of stuff. So we should be very clear. And when we're talking about us, we separate ourselves from any other group that has been victimized.
It's totally unique.
Yeah. Now, I don't see my people here today, but I want to recognize all of you. Something I think is happening to our technical stuff. So I don't see your names up here, but believe me, I appreciate you. Sharon, Shivers, I see you. Okay. Jabbar, thank you. Wow. So the Democrats wanted to still, let me see what it said, still continue slavery back then. Oh, yeah, well, that was the Democratic thing at the time. It changed over into Republican later on. Lloyd Shiver, Jabbar, Sheila, excellent. Laura Lynn, I just appreciate all of you who've been watching. I know you've learned so much. Paul Green, Tiffany Barker, love you, baby. Lloyd Shivers again. Okay, I just want to thank all you all, and you know that when I tell you that Larry Harris coming on, I know you'll all be anxious to watch, because you know that this brother, he knows what he's talking about, and that's one of the experts that I'm talking about. When we get these groups together under an umbrella that classified it as Africanism, we're going to be freed, because they are going to show us how, not what happened, when it happened, but how to reverse. Because unless you know how to reverse the situation, then we got to learn that. And Larry, I thank you so much. We're going to be calling you again. You know we will. Thank you so much for being with us today. And God bless all of you.
I'm glad to be with you. God bless you too. All right.
Thank you, brother.
Take care.
Take care now.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.